So later tonight, when we're very, very exhausted, we're going to be doing something special called Twiggy and the Fat Man. And we won't get into too much detail what it is, but I just want to say Rosser is obviously Twiggy, and I am Fat Man. And my name is arguably worse, but when I told Rosser about this idea, he said, okay, but if anyone calls me Twiggy, I will kill myself. Aha! Shut up, Twiggy. Let's start the show. Hello, welcome to a very special thing we're going to be doing here on Unwatchable. It's something called The 40 Hours, a mini-series, _ We Hate Ourselves.
I thought it was We Hate Ourselves, a 4-part mini-series.
The 40 Hours.
Oh, The 40 Hours is also pretty solid. It's a old title.
It's all just titles. I don't understand titles. So let's explain it. Rosser and I, we are at Rosser's gorgeous mountain house in an undisclosed location. And we will be staying up with two of our friends, one of which you are hearing right now because he can't keep himself contained.
I'm not good at it.
We are, and as well as his wonderful parents, who I wish were my parents. Sorry, Dad. And we are here, and we will be staying up, not as parents, but the four of us will be staying up for 40 hours. Every 10 hours, we will be recording an episode of the podcast, each one with a special theme. But just to ease you into it, this first episode is going to be a regular episode.
With sane people and not exhausted people talking.
Yeah.
It's going to be like relatively coherent, and that'll be nice for y'all.
So let's do some introductions. Directly to my left is Robin Martinez, mother of Rosser Martinez.
Hi.
She's my mom.
And then
this is weird for me.
I'm the mom. I'm the mom of Twiggy. So proud.
Across the table, sort of across the table from her, is Rosser's father, Dr. Rick Martinez.
Hi, great to be here. You're a doctor? I am.
You're scary.
I did a dissertation and everything.
I feel like we can do a lot more stuff now. Let me get some gloves.
Talking before he's been introduced is the red-headed wonder from down under, Will Hodgdon.
Okay.
Hello, everyone.
He's also not Australian. I just like that name.
Yeah.
Then next to him is Rosser Twiggy Martinez.
I've been here for several episodes. This isn't new. You've already heard me speak. We also have to my left, Wyatt Asbury, who sawed his mouth off in a freak accident and will not be speaking for the duration of this podcast. But you'll hear weird laugh sounds. That's him desperately asking for food and water and other necessities for life. Go on.
I like gushers.
He can speak. It's a miracle.
He did.
He's our Hodor, except instead of only saying Hodor, he can only say, I like gushers.
Oh, God.
Isn't that right, Wyatt?
I like gushers.
I'm going to go ahead and lead in with that. So, Hodor specifically, talking about BuzzFeed quizzes and how crap BuzzFeed is as a website. So, for the record, or any website that asks for which Game of Thrones character are you, because 9 times out of 10, you are Hodor regardless of behavior or your answers. They're just going to say that because it's like, oh, I'm Hodor! And then the other people who takes the quiz will be like, me too! And they'll all bond over how Hodor they are.
The best quiz I ever saw, like every answer, the answer was Hodor. So if someone offered you a mysterious chalice of wine, what would you do? Hodor. If you went to a wedding, what would you do? Hodor. If you had to take archery, how would you shoot? Hodor. You are Hodor. Congratulations.
Congrats. It's not like...
There wasn't much of a mystery there.
I think quite like quizzes on websites and stuff are pretty painful because it's a lot of really weird arbitrary stuff, and then they somehow piece it together to see how well you fit the stereotype. But it's like it's so long. Like, let me tell you how many quizzes I've done on the internet. I've just stopped doing because I'm like, am I really going to spend at least 10 minutes on this arbitrary ranking that I'll definitely disagree with in the end? So it's like I'll spend all this time doing it, and then it'll be like, oh, your element is you're an earthbender, and I'm like, no, I'm not, and then I'll X out of it because it's like it was just a huge waste of my time, and it's inaccurate, whatever else. It's a pain. I think they should just stop, and people shouldn't have quizzes. They should just.
I've never done one. Not one.
Don't. They're horrible.
BuzzFeed itself is interesting because it's like one half of it is 9 sets of back hair that look like actor Rick Moranis. The other part of BuzzFeed's actual news. It's weird, and BuzzFeed's been buying journalists from legitimate news sources for some reason.
Thank you. So, like, at least it's better than most of the journalism they had, where everyone could just waltz in there, write an article, pump one out, and then, like, leave, you know? It's like,
Roster's
You're
eating.
eating food.
So many people
I
are
have
eating
gushers in my mouth because I, too, like gushers.
What's funny is he cut out soda for fear that it would rot his teeth out, yet he's eating gushers.
I like gushers. It's a solid claim.
Odor.
You're stealing his gimmick.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was a Wyatt's thing.
Self-awareness.
I'm not stealing it if it's right.
The interesting thing about this podcast is that like, no one in our school has heard Wyatt speak, and I don't think anyone in this podcast, in the time we're doing this, because Wyatt is staying up with us, I don't think people are going to hear Wyatt speak.
Wyatt, you speak in the dugout. Come on. In the dugout.
I
heard him speak like
I think it's
like
40
three
hours,
other
so
words
maybe.
when I like took pop culture with him, but that was about it. I forgot what they were. It was I thought it was pretty momentous at the time, but
Let's get right into a little bit of controversy over here. So the favorite newsman of many people at this table, Jon Stewart, recently announced his retirement. There was lots of speculation about who would replace him, and Comedy Central chose to replace him with South African comedian Trevor Noah. He's also a contributor for the show. I've seen his stand-up specials. He's a very funny man, but about a day after he was selected, people started digging back in his Twitter feed, and they found all these jokes he made that some would consider to be anti-Semitic. I, as a Jewish person, did not find them offensive. I laughed at, like, all of them because they were funny. So, I mean, what do we think, people? Do you think you should be allowed to make fun of minorities and groups of people who might be offended if it's, funny and not tasteless?
Well, humor is an interesting thing, right? And it's like it's how it's how it's meant, and then there's how it's taken. And I find whether it's race or it's country of origin, whatever, I find everybody who makes a joke, especially when it goes national, there's like 95% of people who think it's funny, and there's like 5% who are very offended. It's just and some stuff is bad, right? Mm-hmm. But it is. I think with the world getting hearing you right away, it's tough to not offend anybody.
Wait, is that his shtick?
Well, no, it's not his shtick. Like, it's like in his whole Twitter feed, they found like 4 offensive jokes, which, I mean, some of them weren't as funny, but.
well, he happens. I haven't actually seen his Twitter posts because I'm a lowly plebe and I don't have Twitter. But
Too expensive.
Well, no.
He's a lowly plebe who also doesn't even have a sapphire glass Apple Watch. You and your plebeian ion X glass.
I don't have a watch.
What is a plebe? Anyway, what's a plebe?
It's so they're in the Latin culture. We'll do a little history here.
Plebeians.
The plebeians were the common folk, and then there were the patricians, and they were all the rich people who were allowed to vote and stuff. So calling someone a plebe is meant to be insulting.
It's like calling someone a
A
peasant.
bunch of
call
news
yourself
sources
a plebe,
started
though.
fearing that there'd be class warfare within people who have Apple Watches. So people have to get the Sport Edition, which is the cheaper one. They were like, "Oh, you plebeian with your Ion X glass."
Do we have to worry about this stuff?
What?
We're kind of
Samuel
over
does.
worried here about things.
All right, yeah, Trevor Noah. So, but I've seen a couple of his stand-up sketches.
He's funny.
He's funny, and I haven't seen his Twitter posts, so I don't know how.
One of the tweets he sent out, it was behind every rich rapper is a twice as rich Jewish man. # Dr. Dreidel. I laughed.
See
It was funny.
that sounds less like a anti-Semitic joke and more like a pun than anything.
You're right.
And whenever I listen to watch his sketches, are they called sketches? You can call them sketches, right?
Bits, I guess.
Yeah.
When he's on the Daily Show, I mean, those are like bits he does with Stewart. But
he I always found his humor not to be racist, but like to be rather honest, somewhat truthful, and I kind of agreed with some of the opinions he expressed, especially in the environment he grew up in. I thought it was pretty funny.
yeah. He has a special on Netflix that's called African American,
That's
which
what
is
I watched, yeah.
very, very funny, and you should watch it if you have Netflix. What do you think, Wyatt?
All the gushers.
Wait, that's different than before. He said want. That's a new word.
I think
We are Groot.
I think that a lot of humor is just that, is on pointing out on like unnoticed truths, things that everybody knows, but it's like no one's really pointed it out. So as long as you bring it up and like no one's really noticed it before, it can be funny. So it's like a lot of it is like a lot of humor. It does have like truth to it, and that's what makes it funnier. So I feel like if he's just an honest man saying the things that other people are too afraid to say, then it's like, is he really a racist, hateful person? I also think that people like to be offended all the time, so they'll look for reasons to go ahead and cry at things or try to take things down, being like, oh, we this is offensive, guys, let's start a hashtag and take this down, and then it doesn't work ever, and then God, I remember when people started cancel Colbert. That was a mess. There was an interview with the Huffington Post with the woman who started this hashtag, and
I saw that.
And this
It was scary.
This young, I can't remember her ethnicity.
She was Asian American.
Yeah, she's this young woman. Like after the interviewer started talking to her, every time he like said something that could be like asked a question that could have been interpreted as like a personal attack, she's like, "Oh well, you can't say things like that to me because you're a white male." And it's like that way to go ahead and quickly invalidate yourself and your entire claim and your entire revolution that you started yourself. Suffice to say, Colbert was not canceled because it was a joke of a movement.
He's becoming the next host of the Late Show. But like the story with that was Colbert was making fun of the CEO of Lululemon, who was quoted saying, "I chose the name Lululemon because the L sound doesn't appear in Asian phonetics, and I find it funny to watch them pronounce it. A racist thing to say."
But actually why he named the company that, which is funny.
So Colbert decided, I'm going to play on this, and he made a fake company called Ching Chong Bing Bong's thing for Asian American progress. Funny. The problem was the Colbert Report Twitter, which Stephen Colbert does not control, tweeted out that joke without a link to the episode or the clip, so everyone just thought, oh, what's going on here? And then that's when the hashtag started. And the backfire was the person who started the hashtag got a bunch of death threats on Twitter.
Really?
Shocking.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, just to tell you two things. One of them is that when Jon Stewart started, and it's funny because he's done it, 17 years?
Yeah.
And I'll age myself. We were around when he started. He was terrible. He was terrible. He would sit there and tell these jokes, and it would like be this dead pause, and it's like, okay. Then you go to the next segment, and that's the such segment. But over time, he kind of matured, and he got into it, and he got a rhythm, and he got mature, and he kept getting more and more influential, and everything else. And the problem we have now, that was 17 years ago. We didn't have all this stuff. And now you have this kind of, a new name comes out, and all of a sudden people are going to go out and try to make judgments. And, that's hard for human beings to be perfect from the get-go. It really is.
The first story Stewart covered in The Daily Show, I watched his first episode after he announced his retirement, and it was like basically the trial for Bill Clinton's impeachment had just started. But I found out recently, Monica Lewinsky, she gave a TED Talk a while back.
Right, recently.
Yeah, about shame.
Yeah, it was about shame, and like she was actually the first victim of cyberbullying, pretty much.
Yeah.
We didn't have Twitter, but like people were like sending her hate email and stuff like
I
that.
respect her for that. I thought it was great.
Yeah, it was a good TED Talk that she gave.
She was smarter than you ever thought. After you read what she said, she was actually smarter than you would have ever imagined.
She certainly has perspective.
Her Stewart's best first joke, though, was they were bringing in an old congressman to swear in the Chief Justice for the impeachment trial, and said, "Congressman, old guy, ears still ringing from the Big Bang." And the rest was history. Okay, moving on. Anyone else have things we want to talk about? We are very underprepared for this episode. Just disclosure.
Well, Wyatt's got a big list, right?
Please don't.
Well,
if I had to bring up something, I would say nowadays, like with the internet, everybody kind of thinks they're an expert at everything just because they can Google it and read about it in an article, and then they can jump to a quick conclusion that they know pretty much everything about the topic. I think a lot of people today kind of consider themselves, more knowledgeable, even though they may not necessarily be, just because they have access to the internet. So, I think it's interesting how like how Rosser was saying, people just kind of think they know everything, or they just want to start like riots about stuff that they may not necessarily know everything about. And I just think that's kind of a huge problem when we're talking about like people being like very extreme in like their beliefs about certain things, and also taking offense to a lot of things that may not be like as serious as people take them. So I don't know. Obviously you could have like your own opinion about like where the internet's going, where like people like, are they getting smarter? Are they getting dumber? Is it making them look better to like have a job, or is it making them look worse? Or I don't know. I mean, you guys can say that.
I mean, that's the
That's a
thing.
great point.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I think also with the revolutionizing of the internet, I guess, and this may be a weird observation, but I think death threats mean almost nothing these days, just because anyone can do it, and it's like anyone can sit on the other side. Like, I think people tend to forget that there's other people sitting on the other side of the screen, you know, and it's so easy to dehumanize something and then just not treat it like a human. So it's like, if you're holding your phone and you type in, hey, on Twitter, hey, you should die, or some probably more extreme, vulgar fashion of the same sentence, I think it's very easy to just look at the phone and be like, oh, well, I can just type this in and not have to worry about it, and or I'm not actually going to do this, but it's a very nice way to like relieve stress. There was, not too long ago, there was something on 4chan where somebody started this thing where it's like, all right, first person to tweet a bomb threat to American Airlines wins, and somebody actually did. Someone was dumb enough to do that, and like, although they obviously didn't have intentions of bombing the thing, they found out who that person was,
The FBI.
went to his house and arrested her, I believe.
Yeah.
And it was like, what do you think was going to happen? You know, it's like people think that they can say things without consequence, and that they can say things to other people that are incredibly mean and just make the assumption, oh, they're not going to get hurt, I'm not going to get hurt. So not only why cyberbullying is such a huge problem, because if they were in face-to-face, these people wouldn't be saying the same things, you know. But I don't know. It's very interesting how it's given everyone the power of a voice, and so things.
But also anonymity, which is
Yeah,
really interesting
definitely.
because, you know,
Until they
if
come to
you-
your house and arrest you, and then
No,
Yeah,
but my point,
but-
a different issue. My
being able
point
to
is
say it,
that
yeah.
if in your neighborhood, you wouldn't treat other people a certain way because you live there and they're your neighbors and everything else, and you try to get along or you have a different approach to a discussion. But one of the things the internet allows you to do is to come in and make these flamograms under a false name and stuff, and it's kind of scary because I've learned about cyberbullying, which I thought was not much of anything, you know, until I kind of saw it in action.
It's serious.
But it's pretty serious stuff. Yeah.
If you've seen like the comments section of any YouTube video, it's like the worst place in the world. I watched YouTube a while back. Last year they did something called the YouTube Music Awards, which is any artist who blew up on Twitter, they had an award show for them. It's whatever. So I was watching,
Thank you, God.
and the comments thread on the side of this, it was all live, and you could just see it come through, and I saw someone type Heil Hitler, Heil Hitler, Heil Hitler like 20 times, just
Really?
because they could.
Yeah.
And then it faded away into the stream of comments, but you know, that's like put out there, and the YouTube comments are the worst thing, just by far.
Seems like the internet is more of like a place for hate than like a place for like progress, or like
It's-
maybe
I agree with
doing
that.
what it's supposed to do and like kind of help like humans as a whole or people as a whole like get better and act like civilized people. It seems like we're going the wrong
and why is it a hater thing and not a love thing?
right?
People
It
always
could go the other way, but it
People-
doesn't seem to go in that way.
People like to play just blame the internet. It's more of when you give people anonymity, that's when their guard of being around goes away. So the internet just exists. It's sort of like science or something. It exists. It has no opinion. But the people of the internet, when you give them anonymity, it it comes out. Rosser?
You were saying something about like it's more hate than it is love, and I think the reason behind that is what you were saying, or Rosser, was that it sort of detaches people from that sort of face-to-face connection, and you sort of you're blocked off from any emotional attachment, and it's much easier to do something hurtful without an emotional attachment than to do something caring without an emotional attachment.
Right.
You kind of, the sort of whole love-hate thing, it's easier to, yeah.
Yeah, I think the other interesting thing is that the internet gives us such crazy amounts of power. Like, you can, or like power in terms of like knowledge, you know, like you could literally put with the internet. I imagine like several hundreds of years ago, if they had the internet, and that like if it was more of like an information database as opposed to just like a place where people would share their thoughts. So it was just like you can go and like spend hours or like days learning things and like or like taking like courses or just like researching things or understanding whatever you really want, because that power is just like in your hands now, and you can go research and study whatever you want and do whatever you want to put your mind to. But instead we'd rather spend it just like wasting hours and hours on like some image board or something like that, and like arguing with people you don't know and calling them idiots and then leaving. And we'd rather do that. We find some sick pleasure out of that as opposed to like learning, which I think is interesting. I think if we replaced, if something that would teach people things was more prominent than something like Vine or Twitter, we would have a lot more of a like just intelligent society.
Well, I actually do the opposite, and this may just be a me thing, but and I think it may be because I have really horrible ADHD, not like physical ADHD, but more of mental ADHD, and I find, because I'm not exactly such a social person, so I don't always find that social media outlet, but I get a question in my head and I go to look up something, and as I'm looking it up, I find 2 or more things that I want to look up, so I open up multiple tabs, and before I know it, I've wasted away 3 or 4 hours of my day researching something stupid like, I don't know, medieval England and the way it was divided geographically. and I have like 10 tabs open, and I completely waste my time.
That's another thing I want to get to going. It's more that's the idea of wasting time on the internet. There's always this culture of the way people will shoo away us serious gamers. It's like, oh, I spent.
That's like what you were talking about earlier.
I spent.
You use the word serious and gamers in the same sentence.
We'll get to that.
They are.
It's say, oh, I spent 5 hours today playing League of Legends and Super Smash Brothers, and then they'll say, God, how much free time do you have in your hands? But I don't judge you if you tell me, oh, I spent 5 hours watching a football game, or I spent 5 hours going to a football game. Why do I not judge you for having all that time on your hands? Like, you're enjoying yourself, you're entertaining yourself.
Yeah, we have a lot of kids at our school who just like kind of don't really understand that whole movement, because it's like, oh wow, they have so much time on their hands, specifically that, and then it's like you'll see other people using the internet literally just to like watch very dumb videos or whatever else. Like, it's a resource that's there and everyone can use it the way they want. So like, I don't think we should be like looking at other people with like shame or like confusion with just basically using the internet for a different purpose, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would just say that video games have like a terrible like connotation to them. Like, anytime you just hear video game or see video games, people just automatically assume kind of you're up to no good, or like you're not doing anything productive, when it's just kind of very similar to just scrolling through Twitter or just using a web page or looking up random stuff on the internet or looking at pictures of cats or whatever. You know, it's kind of just the same kind of mindless thing.
There's lots of psychological data that shows that playing a video game can have similar releases of dopamine to going out and like playing soccer or something like that.
Or gambling.
Only it's not as physical.
Or gambling too.
It's not as
bad and
It's
good.
really good. You drink like a Coke or something while you're like playing the video game.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I don't want to go off on a tangent or anything, but I learned something about dopamine a couple weeks back, and apparently that release of dopamine, if it gets regular, that's what causes addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And literally, in that case, you can pretty much get addicted to anything.
Yeah.
Like, it is possible to get addicted to video games, but
You can get addicted to
using
sports.
your
Point
example, you can get addicted to soccer or to
Eating.
eating.
Eating is one.
Really, anything that releases dopamine, you can get addicted to at various
That's why I
levels.
mentioned gambling. It's the same
That-
thing.
that's
Yeah.
also
It's
that's what
actual
you said.
dopamine.
Yeah.
That same research, it showed that like playing video games help people recover from depression and stuff like that because those dopamine releases
Feels
help.
good.
Yeah. What do you, as parents who have a son who plays video games a lot, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Pretend I'm not here.
Destroy everything we love in front of us, please.
Put earplugs in and just cover your head with a
No,
bag.
I have two things. One is I think they're fine in many ways, but I think everything's good in moderation,
Yeah.
right? Even water, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, too much can actually overhydration. You actually end up with a low sodium level and become mentally unstable, right?
Is it a
So-
gallon per hour or something like that?
What's that?
Is it? It's like a gallon an hour or something like that, like some ridiculously high amount of water.
Oh well, I see it in the summertime when people drink water and they don't replace it with salts, right? They just dilute out. But there is research showing that, like with the internet coming, you skim across the top, and what you don't do is develop the synapse connections in depth. There's a book called The Shallows about the cortical layer becoming thinner versus being deeper, and so it concerns me when people can't like read a book like from front to back or study something in depth, right? And so that's the trade-off is constantly going shallow versus going in depth.
Which is
And so I think,
what Wyatt was talking about earlier.
yeah, so I think one has to be able to own that and take control and do it in moderation, right? You need some physical activity. It's great to have a relaxing time with the games, and it's actually, I think there's some social aspects to it which are great, and thought processes and strategy and things like that. But I also think that you got to make sure that you don't give up things like a magazine or a book or something like that.
Or meeting a girl.
Meeting people and going out.
Yeah, I actually recently started like
Social skills are important, right?
I recently started, and I don't know if this is a result of just like having a short attention span and switching from
You said
article
that
to
right.
article or reading anything on Reddit or anything like that. But like I've actually started reading again, which I think is interesting.
I like reading.
I don't really know exactly how that came about. I know I'm a very visual person, and most of the reason why I didn't read things was just because I couldn't like picture what was going on. But I realized what I think what makes books more appealing to me is if it's more like information or like science as opposed to like a story, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't really read stories as much or don't really get as much out of them because I skim over important details or I'll have to read something a lot to understand what happens. Versus like I'm reading a book now called Top Dog: The Science of Winning and Losing, and I've stuck with it a lot actually because it's very interesting. And it actually just has like science behind it, and it's talking about how the mind works. And there's nothing to visualize because like you can just visualize and look at a brain, like just being there. And it's like that doesn't, you don't need to visualize anything to understand what it's saying, basically. Which I think that's what I think makes a lot of reading really interesting. We've just and like I don't, again, to relate it back to my father's point, is that I don't really understand why that like suddenly came about. I just think I was just tired of like looking at things with not a lot of depth, and I'd rather put time into something and get depth out of it as opposed to just...
But I would watch you read Fortran or Reddit for an hour. Like I couldn't speak to you
Fortran.
because you were reading.
But he's
everything on
I'm not saying I
Fortran.
gave that up.
He's
I'm just-
bouncing around versus what he's saying now is he's following a path.
Well, yeah,
of
but
thought,
something
right?
like that's more of like it's more of a social thing with
Yeah.
Reddit and 4chan because you're actually
A book, it's
that
just
goes back to
a
the
book.
talk
It's just
about-
you and the story the book's
It's
trying
a
to tell.
story, that's right.
There's yeah, I've recently bought a Kindle, and mostly because internet and stuff, and also I don't want to. I'm a tree hugger, but I also bought it because the financial aspect of it is the Kindle's an expensive device, but if I read a certain number of books, then it becomes worth it. So I have to read 10 books on this thing in order for it to become worth it, having bought it. So it's more of the motivation for me. I want to move on to one more point since we are very lucky to have a doctor in our midst with us.
CPR.
Yes.
Me
You
too.
did a
I can
dissertation.
And
I know it in
help.
theory.
I can help.
we have two medical professionals with us. So recently, last week or 2 weeks ago, I can't
Are you going to
remember.
say something shocking that somebody's going to need CPR? Is that what you're saying?
No, lots of
I can jump out the window, give you some practice.
lots of
No jumping out the window.
lots of stuff about the Affordable Care Act came out. It's costing less than we expected it to cost. Insured rates are up, like there's more people insured than ever. Our GDP
Hospitals are doing great.
our GDP on
Thanks,
health
Obama.
is like sort of down, but it's still the highest in the world. But
Yeah, actually, thank you, Obama.
Thanks, Mama.
so there's lots
Thanks,
of
Obama.
good news, but there's also bad news. I only know so much of this, so please take it away. What else should people know about this stuff that was released about the Affordable Care
the
Act?
funny thing about the Affordable Care Act is that actually it really was, I think, I can't remember, it's either 9 or 11 points. Of those, I think, like, let's say if it was 11, then it was 10 that were things actually both parties agreed to. And, how we got here, why do we even have the Affordable Care Act, right? Why do we have Medicare? The reason we have Medicare is because the insurance companies realize that over 65 is a risk, so no one would insure you, and so it was a leading cause of people becoming bankrupt. Okay, AARP was actually started to give health insurance to teachers, and it was for retired school teachers, and we kind of forget how we got here. So over time, we had two big gaps. The people who were really old with chronic disease, no one would insure, so the government took on that responsibility, and then the rest of the insurance, people who were healthy wouldn't go in, so the prices went up. So you had more and more people who wouldn't afford because the prices would go up. So it was this very strange sort of market condition. So what Obamacare did was say, okay, everybody's got to play. You can't exclude pre-existing conditions.
Similar to
right?
car insurance.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I'd have to study that one more, but
Yeah.
because you have to have it. That's a good.
You
point,
have to have car
right?
insurance,
right? And you can't have pre-existing conditions. And we're going to extend it up to people up to 26 years old. There was a bunch of these things. So what happened was, and we're going to create the exchanges, which allowed the employers to say, I'm just going to throw you in there because they've been trying to move from giving you specific benefits to just giving you a certain amount of money. And so, all those things were things that everybody was talking about for years. But when the bill came in, gosh, because it was like your party versus my party, or you did it, we had a lot of debate and discussion. But the bottom line is, for hospitals, for example, they get like 15, 20, maybe 30% of their patients with no insurance. Well, that's a lot. That's a lot to hit if you gotta see everybody and you're trying to be there for the public. So in the end, I think that's fine, and then it's moving forward. But what's going to happen is now changing, and now you're going to see the reimbursement start going down. So you're going to see people taking a lot more control of their own health care, right, with all the new insurance and all that. So I think there's a lot more to go on this. We'll see where it goes. And I'll be honest with you, even if it goes away tomorrow, I don't think anything's going to change, right? Because you can't regulate getting older, and you can't regulate the growth of technology is already happening, and the younger people have their own views about health care, and more people are paying out of their pockets, so they've got more say in the thing, right? Growth of consumerism. You guys are very active in your own consumerism, what you buy and don't buy.
I think the other thing to just point out about is we do spend a ridiculous amount of our GDP on healthcare. When you look at all these countries, like Great Britain has the cheapest healthcare system by far in terms of GDP, but it's also actually a socialist system where the government regulates hospitals and stuff like that. The French have one that...
So is Maryland, actually, but go ahead.
The French have one that people always rave about. So, Obamacare is definitely a fix, but it's not going to be the last healthcare law.
It had to start somewhere.
Yeah.
I was going to say, the one thing is that, in America, what usually works best is some rules, but you have the free market help decide, and I think we're moving that direction.
There's a lot of stuff, though, when you let the free market... I think a lot of stuff should be regulated by the free market. I'm of the personal and controversial opinion that we should disband the Postal Service and give it all to UPS because the Postal Service is expensive. And while I
think we should take all the spending and put it in education because I know that's a huge thing.
It tickled me a while. It took me a while back. So the Postal Service, Postmaster General says, if we stop delivering mail on Saturday, we won't have to fire anyone. And then the government said no. So then people got fired and stuff like that. We live in Georgia, and our education system is bad. So we all go to the same private school.
I am a victim of the... I think I don't want to say it quite publicly, but I think that the city we live in has one of the worst public school systems in the state, which is, as Georgia is one of the worst public schools, and it's horrible. But I went to middle school for 1.5 years, and it was
In Georgia?
Yeah, it was one of the. I had come from an international school and into that school, and it was one of. It may have just been my personal way of learning or whatever. I don't know.
I
but
think the conviction of 13 people this week was a clue that you're right. But
And I think I went to one of the worst middle schools in the city too, and it was not fun.
There are lots of cities and states where the public school system is comparably good to the private school system, but in Georgia, it's really a sad truth. There's a couple of public schools in the city of Atlanta which have lots of rich people going to them, like I went to Morris Brandon, and the reason Morris Brandon exists, there's two facets of people pretty much. There's rich people who want 6 years of good education for free, and then there's just poor people who live in apartment complexes that just happen to be in the school district. So Brandon is a really good place, but then after Brandon, that middle school, all the rich people pull out and go to private school. So the school after Brandon doesn't have as much of a PTA to fund it, and that's where the education dip tends to happen. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about what else is going to happen. So this episode, I'm putting it up on Monday. The next episode, we're going to record these all within the same period of 40 hours. I'm going to publish each episode week by week. So next episode, Twiggy and the Fat Man. You will be hearing that next Monday. Anything else we want to wrap up on? Parting words of wisdom, Twiggy, Wyatt,
Gushers.
Gushers.
This is Gushers.
We're all out.
This is
We're all out.
Still
by
like
the way.
Gushers.
We're all-
we literally, I think we ate them in the first 10 minutes. They were gone. Actually,
Yeah.
I don't even think we even went 10 minutes.
We actually opened them before the podcast so that it wouldn't like pick up on the noise.
Like
and we
what's
just
the noise
shoveled
like?
them into our
What's the
mouths.
noise like?
Yeah, I was making.
Wait, crinkle a rapper.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to experiment.
We wanted to save you people from hearing that. Well, be happy, be healthy, and keep eating Gushers. Goodbye.
Do we do plugins?
So, quick disclaimer: we are fully rested human beings for this episode. Rosser, thank God for him being a saint, decided that maybe we should be
Also
awake.
being a
I figured that I shouldn't be sacrificing my own health for like the mild sick enjoyment of like maybe 100 people. Now if it was like 10,000 and like we were getting donations for like the Cancer Foundation, sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. But if I'm just doing this like for the possible entertainment of some people, it's not worth it. Additionally, when we actually did record the episode at 24-hour mark, I think, it was stupid. It was the worst. You can go and listen to it. It was the dumbest thing.
It was the 20-hour mark because I stayed up 4 more hours.
Okay.
because I wanted to be
we record, then Rosser just says, "Hey, what if we're like not wanting to kill each other?" And then we all decide to go to sleep. Will, being a fool,
I
decided
was
to say,
not a fool. I was being the strong one here. Okay.
He wanted
I had
to make it a-
previously stayed up 37 hours a long time ago, and I knew I could do it again.
and
only
I'm
even
sure you
better.
had fun during that time, didn't
"Yeah,
you?
what'd you do for 4 hours by yourself?
Hey,
Tired."
it
Oh, I was
wasn't-
talking
it
about the
wasn't-
37 hours.
Yeah. The 37 hours wasn't by ourselves. It was okay. For those of you who don't know the story, it was 6 of us, and we all put $40 into a bucket, and whoever stayed up the longest would get the bucket. So
not
naturally,
the money, just a bucket.
Oh, shut up. So I managed to be the third to last person to stay up, and I stayed up 37 hours. It was actually pretty fun because we found random things to do, but by the end of it, I started to almost hallucinate. And I believe I started banging my head on. Have you guys watched El Dorado?
No, but
No,
make it
I
quick.
have not.
Okay, there's a scene where the guy's trapped in a place and the guy's just repeatedly hitting his head on the wall. That was essentially me. And then eventually I went to sleep, and that was it.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna discuss anything too far, but we spent a lot of the time being awake, bonding and getting to know things about each other that we will never tell anyone else. But the thing is, apparently we're just not interesting people. We ran out of things to talk about. Yeah.
I think it's very interesting because we had a very diverse group here. We all came from relatively different backgrounds, and even though Samuel and I are very good friends, we don't have too terribly much in common. So it made it a very interesting dynamic because all of us came from such different places,
Yes.
And I think we ran out of things to talk about, not because we ran out of actual things to talk about, because our minds were like, oh god, I don't want to say words. There were at least 6 hours of just raw silence, and then we decided to maybe not do stupid things or find something to do, and it became a progressively more miserable experience as we hit the halfway mark, and then we're like, oh my god, we're halfway there. And normally you'd be like, oh well, I don't want to abandon something that I'm so far into, but this case being the exception because
We recorded an episode and it was just bad. And I'm gonna post it so you can hear it, but
trust me,
Yeah.
believe me when I say I felt so dumb. We actually, for the first time, normally when I say stupid things at the beginning of the podcast, Samuel's like, no, let's keep it in, it's funny, guys. And then this time,
You
he actually
actually had
stopped the recording.
You had us
This time-
restart the recording.
This time I was like, dude, we're like, this is dumb. We need
We
to
all
like.
just.
Samuel actually had the good judgment to like.
Yeah.
Stop
I'm
the thing.
gonna post the bad episode at the end of the month just so you can have two good if you're listening to this, you will have first listened to our first episode that we did with Roster's parents. Then you're listening to this one. Next week you will listen to the one we're gonna record directly after this one, and then the final week of April you will hear the one where we were terribly tired and it was bad. What do you think, Wyatt?
Well, we ran out of gushers, so I don't have much to say.
Okay, let's
This
start.
is a super long intro.
And with that, the longest intro we've ever done for a fairly short episode, let's start the show. So since we were very, very well rested, one thing that we did get to do is Roster and I got to catch up on our Pokemon game because we brought our Nintendo DSs with us, and we got to catch up on playing Pokemon, and Roster was making his Hitler Youth Pokemon party.
Okay,
And
IV breeding is fine, but
It's the power. It's like modern.
don't bother explaining it to them. They don't
It's
care.
just it's eugenics. It's eugenics.
Here's the main thing that I think would be necessary to discuss, which is that for some reason, like, things that are popular with people at certain age groups are basically no longer cool or acceptable, or they're very exception based. They're no longer cool or acceptable after you hit a certain age. For example, one of the biggest being like Pokemon. You know, a lot of people are just like, oh, Pokemon's stupid, it's just a thing we did while we were kids or whatever else. But it's like, I've noticed my 17-year-old self, that's how old I am, right? Has been enjoying it, like, just as much as I did when I was younger, if not more, just because I'm able to appreciate it with a more developed mind. And additionally, they've still been making Pokemon games all this time because of their wide popularity. So I think it's very interesting because I remember there was one time in 7th grade specifically where I still played Pokemon and all that stuff, but I wasn't really loud about it. I kept it low key, you know. But
Under the radar.
there was a kid like grabbed another kid's nipples, and he started pinching them, and he just says, "Name 5 Pokemon," and so the dude goes, Squirtle, Charmander, Bulbasaur, Pikachu, other socially acceptable one to know, and it's like. I almost felt like in that moment he probably knew a lot of Pokemon. He probably remembered a lot, you know.
He was going through the good
He,
ones.
he wasn't allowed to because he's like, oh god, I need to run through a list in my head of like socially acceptable Pokemon. All right, let's see. There's Mewtwo, Pikachu. No, shut up! I'm about to list all the socially acceptable Pokemon. These are the ones you're allowed to know and still be a cool person by 90% of everyone's standards. Here they go. Ready? Blastoise, Charizard, Bulbasaur, the thing that Bulbasaur evolves into, Pikachu, the other Pikachu that's orange, Charizard again, Mewtwo, and the big one from that movie, the
Lugia.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait,
Pokemon 2000.
you don't even know the names? Of
No,
the
I
ones
know,
you're
I
like-
know freaking all the Pokemon, but my point is that people aren't allowed to know them. So it's like you could be like, oh, what's the other Pokemon from that duo? You have like Lugia and you also have Ho-Oh, but it's like nobody knows what friggin' Ho-Oh is, or if they do, they refuse to act like they know it.
Actually,
I used to think Ho-Oh
Ho-Oh
was
appeared
Ho-Oh.
in the very first episode of the Pokemon cartoon series.
What I'm saying.
I used to think
Also, he
that,
didn't.
I
did.
used to think
Really?
that Ho-Oh
Ash,
was the...
Okay,
I'm
no,
going
I
full-
don't care.
I'm
care.
going full nerd.
No,
here
no,
first.
no.
Fine.
Nobody listening cares at all. So
No.
we're actually talking about how Pokemon isn't like people think Pokemon isn't socially acceptable. So what makes you think all the people who are trying to be socially acceptable care at all?
So I mean, I think another thing, and I think it keeps up a lot better. One thing that holds up ridiculously well that I loved in my childhood, the SpongeBob SquarePants TV series, the old stuff, and the movie, which the first movie, not the Sponge Out of Water bullshit that just came out.
water! Sorry.
Will has not taken his medications, and he can't stand
and that
in
should be an
2
excuse. Sorry, we're talking
days.
about that next. Go on.
No, we're not. SpongeBob holds up extremely well because one of the reasons it's good children's comedy will have really, really deep embedded stuff that adults can laugh at. So you laugh at his like, it's SpongeBob's butt. 10 years later, you're like, I heard that sex joke that they just made in a children's cartoon. I don't know.
I think another thing is that I hear, in my school specifically, I hear more SpongeBob references than I would have thought I would have heard several years later.
Can you feel me, Mr. Krabs?
Are you feeling it now, Mr.?
Oh my god. And they're still funny. It's still very funny, you know. It's still a very funny thing. And what makes me wonder is that it's like both Pokemon and SpongeBob were like just as socially acceptable way back when, but it's like first I'm not really quite sure what makes one more socially acceptable than the other. Although I do enjoy both of those things equally. I think it's very odd how it's like it's funny to know what those SpongeBob quotes and everything, but it's like if you know what Pokemon is, God forbid you like don't get shot. You know, you're not allowed to act like you know about it, which is
There's a whole lot of that nowadays too. Like there old cartoon shows like Fairly Odd Parents and
Wonderful.
and what.
Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Oh yeah.
Yo, that
There's-
show was cash though.
Yeah, so there's like all
Don't even
this
tell me-
stuff that our generation grew up with is now suddenly becoming like you suppressed it during middle school, like everybody else was like, it's so stupid, but now you get to high school and everyone's oh yeah, it's totally cool to know like everything about those shows now.
I think really the point we're trying to make here is that middle school is a terrible time, and if you're listening to this, if you're one of the 100 people who listen to this and you're also a middle schooler, God bless you.
God bless
People-
you.
You're almost out.
Middle
You're almost out.
I used to think that the reason my middle school years sucked was because half of them I spent in public school, but to be perfectly honest, the reason they sucked was because it was middle school. It just sucked.
Everyone did their really stupid things in the end of middle school, or like the things got progressively stupider and stupider until the end of middle school, where they did really stupid stuff. And then once high school started, people were freshmen and were just kind of annoying, but they didn't do as many stupid things. What I think is interesting is that it's like the entire mentality of 7th and 8th grade is pretty much dictating whether or not things are cool or not. And if you know about the uncool thing, you're a nerd and you're dumb. But it's like if you don't know about the cool things, then you're still a nerd and you're still dumb.
I mean, I'm gonna. So Wyatt, what was your transition from middle school to high school like?
Well, I play a lot of games that people probably wouldn't imagine that I do, and just the way that people look at me, like Rosser was saying earlier, like this group of people we have up here, you wouldn't expect like us to be together, I guess. And I think that it's like interesting how our our personalities kind of mix together and make like a fun time, because honestly, like I never really saw myself like hanging out with these kinds of people, and I didn't really want to go into this too far, but and I just think games and Pokemon and SpongeBob and all that stuff, it brings people together that you really wouldn't normally talk to or have a conversation with. And, you know, I'm so glad that I came on this trip, because I feel like these guys are like my brothers. Like, I've known them like my whole life. And, you know, I haven't really like had much of a conversation with like most of them. So, honestly, I would say that like games like Pokemon and TV shows like SpongeBob really just like bring people together and create like memories that I will always remember, like even when I'm an adult or whatever, or just a big kid, you know.
The references or what?
Reach.
References bridge the gaps.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know, man.
So back to what you were saying, Rosser, about like how middle school was 7th graders and 8th graders trying to dictate what was cool and stuff. I think a lot of that ends up having to do with, and I didn't think about it until now, is a lot of it I think has to do with sort of like big fish in a little pond or a little fish in a big pond, you know? Like, you don't really get it as much in elementary school because you're all still little kids and you all still view yourselves that way. But as you get into 7th and 8th grade, you're like, wow, I'm growing up. And in 8th grade, you're definitely like, we're the oldest kids in the school, you know, we should be acting like cool kids. And then you get to freshman year and you're back to this sort of weird stage where you're like, well, I used to be old, but now I'm the youngest. And when you get all the way back to senior year, you know, there's that whole mindset of seniority rules and and I mean, it doesn't really happen at our school too much, but you get at other high schools. There's hazing and sort of this whole, idea of those who are older, sort of more dominant.
I guess the other thing that's different is, like, we go to a private school, and I understand there are many people not fortunate enough to go to one, but, like, public school, I don't really know how it works. I can't speak from experience, but in our case, at least in my grade, I was here before Will got here, and when 8th grade happened, a bunch of people went to other schools in Atlanta that I will say are a little bit more elitist and more fitting to their personalities. So what really happened was after 8th grade, just most of the sucky people were just gone. It was weird, and all of a sudden there was peace in the garden. It was weird.
But what I think is very interesting is how I personally feel that I didn't really blossom too well in middle school. I think I wasn't I did my fair share of stupid things, but unlike other people, I didn't really have much of a social net to fall back on. I had a few friends. I had a few friends. That was nice. But I think that experience specifically helped change me into the man I am today. And not to be edgy and sentimental about it, but it's like, I don't know, I'm glad I didn't let... I know a lot of people who are influenced heavily by the hive minds of people around me. And it's like, there are these people who are constantly following other people and basically not making decisions for themselves of what to like and what to hate and things like that. And obviously that's changed now in high school, and a lot more people have changed. But I think I've developed a lot of I've grown into myself pretty well, and I feel like some of these people who are still constantly looking to please everyone around them are still struggling with this. In the words of Kanye West, there's leaders and there's followers, but I'd rather be a dick than a swallower. Kanye West.
Okay.
Sorry.
I don't know.
That's all I needed to say.
I mean, people get this idea that, high school, if you think High School Musical is your template for high school,
that is,
it is
why
not.
Why would you even
no one
try
here
to base
but
that
go on.
It's not. Well, we could have some elementary schoolers who use that as their format. It's not. There is no Sharpay. If there is a Sharpay, she's being made fun of. Don't worry. I'm referencing High School Musical
really
too much.
Anyone's making you can't find a person at a high school who is not being made fun of by someone.
And the people who try to be elitist, they're being taken down a peg. That's really what the high school dynamic is. So yeah.
Especially at our high school, once you start getting people who are who try to be, the cool kid, they are torn down.
They're the lame kid.
The amount of people who, instead of being cool, great, wonderful individuals like themselves, there's a shocking and alarming amount of people who only thrive because they put others down in front of them. I think that's frankly disgusting, but I see it all too often to ignore it. It seems to be an alternate. You can either be really a wonderful friggin' blossom of a flower, or you can just put other people down and call other people worse than you and make yourself look better for that reason. And obviously, one is much easier than the other, but both net the same result, which is unfortunate. That makes people basically default to that option, but I see it too much, and I think the whole middle school mentality breeds that idea pretty solidly. Put your shirt back on, Will. Jesus Christ.
I got distracted. Go ahead.
With your belly button.
Go on, talk.
All right, we're gonna end the podcast right there.
No.
Hi, I'm Rossi Martinez.
I'm
Stop the recording. We're
I'm
gonna
Will,
stop it on
the cool guy.
We're gonna stop it on this note of Will's discomfort.
Will, the cool guy. Hodgdon.
We'll see you next week.